Billionaire comes home early, shocked at what the maid was teaching his twins.
What's this?
Sir, they asked me to teach them to pray before bed.
Stop. Right now.
They needed comfort. You don't see how they cry when you're not here. This was the only way I knew to help them.
I said stop. Do you think I pay you to poison my sons with that nonsense? Comfort? Don't you ever bring prayers into my house again. You're finished here. Pack your things.
Sir, please, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to offend you. Please, sir. Even broken hearts need light. I hope you'd understand one day.
Get out.
That night, everything changed. A billionaire who had buried his faith, a father who had buried his grief, and a maid who carried nothing but faith in her heart. What began as a quiet evening in a grand but lonely mansion would spark a storm of anger, pain, exile, and, eventually, a story of forgiveness that no one saw coming. This is not just the tale of a man's rage. It is the journey of two broken worlds colliding, and the miracle that rose from the ashes. Welcome back, my wonderful and lovely family. If you're new here, please let me know where you're watching from. Hit the subscribe button so you don't miss the rest of the story. Hitting the notification button would ensure you're the first to see the next story. Wealth. To most people, it is a dream, the shining symbol of success, the promise of power, comfort, and ease. But to him, wealth was a prison made of glass and steel. His mansion stood tall against the horizon, its windows gleaming like mirrors, reflecting a world that believed he had it all. Inside, however, silence ruled. The kind of silence that creeps into your bones, that follows you from room to room, reminding you of everything you've lost. This man, a billionaire by title, a father by blood, but a hollow shell by truth, lived each day with a wound that no riches could heal. Years ago, he had been more than this. He had been a husband, a man with a woman by his side who lit up the walls of his life with laughter and grace. Together, they had twins, two boys whose birth had been the happiest day of his existence. But joy is fragile, and his shattered sooner than he could understand. His wife vanished. No accident, no confirmed death, just gone. One evening, she left the house and never returned. The police searched. The media whispered. Friends speculated. But as days turned into months and months into years, hope turned into ash. No trace. No body. No closure. And so he raised his boys alone. Though in truth, it wasn't raising, but surviving. He threw himself into his empire. Business became his shield, work his escape, wealth his weapon against the pain. But when the lights dimmed in his office and he returned home, the emptiness was always waiting for him. The twins, they were his only anchor. Bright-eyed, playful, yet scarred by the absence of a mother they barely remembered. Children are resilient, they say, but even resilience carries cracks. Sometimes, in the stillness of the night, he would hear them whisper questions he had no answers to. Where's Mommy? Why doesn't Daddy pray? He never answered. He never prayed. Prayers, in his eyes, had betrayed him. He had prayed when his wife went missing. He had begged, cried, pleaded with a God who gave no answers, who returned no miracles. And when the silence stretched too long, he buried faith in the same grave where he buried hope. So he forbade it in his home. No prayers, no religion, no false comforts. Instead, he hired help. Cooks, nannies, drivers, tutors, a small army to run the mansion and care for the twins. Among them, one woman stood out, a young maid, barely 25, with quiet eyes and steady hands. She had come from nothing, a poor village, a life hardened by struggle, but she carried herself with dignity, as though her spirit was richer than the walls she now worked within. Her job was simple: tend to the twins, keep the household routines alive. Yet slowly, almost imperceptibly, she became more than that. She wasn't just a caretaker. She became their comfort. She sat with them when nightmares stole their sleep. She listened when their voices trembled. She laughed at their small jokes, wiped away their tears, tied their shoelaces, and kissed their foreheads when no one was watching. To the twins, she became something they had longed for but couldn't name, a mother's shadow. But to him, to the billionaire, she was just staff. A name on a payroll. A background presence in the hollow theater of his life. He noticed her work but not her worth. He noticed the chores, not the compassion. Because when you've built walls to keep pain out, you also keep light from coming in. And so, day after day, his world carried on. A world of towering skyscrapers and endless board meetings. A world of chauffeurs and tailored suits. A world where business partners respected him, the media admired him, and strangers envied him. But at night, when he walked through the halls of his mansion, he was nothing but a man lost in his own house. The twins' laughter echoed faintly, and though it warmed him for a moment, it also tore at him. For he knew their laughter was missing something. The kind of laughter only a mother's presence could complete. He saw it in their drawings, stick figures of 3 people, never 4. He saw it in their eyes, the way they lingered too long on families they passed on the street. He saw it in their silences, the ones that felt too heavy for boys so young. And though he told himself he was doing his best, deep down, he feared a truth he could not admit. His best was not enough. The mansion was big. Too big for a father who kept his heart locked away. And though staff moved about, tending to rooms and routines, no one truly filled the void. But the maid, she saw what he could not. She saw the twins ache. She saw the cracks in their innocence. And while she respected her employer, she couldn't stand by forever, watching children grow up without the gentle balm of hope. And so, quietly, almost invisibly, she began to give them more. Not money, not luxuries, but words, stories, prayers, little seeds of light planted in their hearts. She thought he would never notice. She thought it would never matter. But all of that would change on the night he came home early. The night that shattered their fragile balance and set into motion a story of rage, exile, forgiveness, and a love no one could have foreseen. It was supposed to be just another evening. A boardroom meeting cut short. A decision finalized earlier than expected. For once, the billionaire thought he might surprise his sons, come home before dinner, perhaps sit with them for a change. The chauffeur pulled into the driveway of the sprawling mansion, headlights cutting across marble pillars. He stepped out, briefcase in hand, the weight of a long day pressing against his shoulders. Inside, the house was quiet, too quiet. Silence, to him, was normal. But on this night, silence carried a hum. A low, whispering hum drifting from the playroom down the hall. Curious, he followed. Each step echoed on the polished floor. The closer he came, the clearer it grew, soft voices, tender words. His hand froze on the door handle, his breath caught in his chest. He knew this rhythm, this cadence, prayers. He swung the door open, and there they were. The maid, kneeling with his sons, their tiny hands folded in hers. Her lips moving softly. The twins' eyes squeezed shut in childlike sincerity. A picture of innocence and betrayal. The room fell silent as his presence filled the doorway. The twins blinked their eyes open, smiles fading into confusion. The maid looked up, startled, but did not let go of their hands. Rage rose in him like fire. His voice thundered, filling the room with a force that made even the walls tremble. "Stop this! What do you think you're doing?" The twins flinched, pulling their hands away, tears already brimming. The maid rose slowly, heart pounding, but her voice calm. "They asked me to teach them, sir. They wanted. I don't care what they wanted." His words cut sharp, like glass shattering. "I told you, there is no place for this in my house. No prayers, no lies, no false hopes." The twins began to cry, their small arms reaching instinctively for the woman who had become their comfort. But she stood frozen, torn between obeying and protecting them. His face twisted, not just with anger but with pain. Old wounds split open, memories of nights spent begging, pleading, praying for answers that never came. His wife's smile, now a ghost. His prayers unanswered. His faith mocked by silence. He could not watch his sons be led down that same empty road. "You're finished here," he spat, voice low but lethal. "Pack your things. You're leaving tonight." The twins wailed, clutching at her skirt, refusing to let go. Their cries echoed down the hall, piercing the mansion's emptiness. But he turned his face away, jaw clenched, his eyes glistening with unshed tears he would never allow them to see. The maid bent down, whispering comfort into the boy's ears, even as her own heart broke. She knew what this meant. She knew her place in this world. A servant, replaceable, powerless. And yet, she whispered anyway, "It's okay, my loves. It's okay." She gathered her few belongings that night, stuffed into a small worn-out bag. No severance. No mercy. Just exile. The chauffeur drove her to the edge of the city, where the roads narrowed and the lights dimmed into shadows. She stepped out into the night, the sound of the mansion's engine fading into distance. Alone. With nothing. Back at the mansion, the boys cried themselves to sleep, their tiny hearts broken in ways no child should endure. And he? The billionaire stood in his study, staring at a glass of untouched whiskey, his reflection fractured in the crystal. He told himself it was necessary. He told himself he had done the right thing. But the silence pressed heavier than ever, whispering doubts he could not silence. Because sometimes the loudest arguments are not with others, but with yourself. Stories like this remind us how fragile family can be. One choice, one moment, and everything changes. Before we continue, take a second to subscribe to this channel and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We want to hear your thoughts, your experiences, your perspective. Your story matters too. That night marked the beginning of a storm neither of them could have imagined. The maid, walking back to a world of poverty she thought she had left behind. The billionaire, sinking deeper into the shadows of his own brokenness. And the twins, caught between them, aching for the love of both the father and the woman who had quietly become their shelter. The disruption had begun. And the ripples of that night would reach farther than anyone could have foreseen. The mansion was quieter than it had ever been. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the hollow, suffocating silence that pressed down on the walls. The laughter of the twins no longer echoed in the hallways. Their little footsteps no longer ran across the marble. Instead, their voices were low, subdued. Their smiles dimmed. The billionaire noticed it instantly. At dinner, they pushed food around their plates, barely eating. At bedtime, they whispered to each other instead of begging him for a story. Sometimes, he caught them sitting by the window, their eyes fixed on the driveway, as if waiting for someone who wasn't coming back. The maid. He told himself it was for the best, that she had overstepped, that she had crossed a line. But every time he replayed her words, children need more than food and toys. They need hope. Something inside him cracked. He tried to bury himself in work, board meetings, phone calls, numbers, charts, decisions. But even in the middle of a presentation, he would see the image flash in his mind. His twins kneeling, their little hands clasped, their voices soft in prayer. And her, calm, radiant, guiding them with a gentle strength. It haunted him. One evening, he came home later than usual. The boys were still awake, sitting cross-legged on the floor of their room. Between them lay 2 toy soldiers and a teddy bear. He watched from the doorway as one of the twins bowed his head. "Let's try to pray like she showed us," the boy whispered. The other nodded eagerly. They clasped their small hands together. Their words were clumsy, broken, but filled with an innocent sincerity. "Please bring her back. Please make Daddy smile again." The billionaire's throat tightened. He stepped back into the shadows, unseen. His heart pounded. Even now, even after I banned it, she left her mark on them. That night, sleep refused to come. He tossed and turned, visions of his wife flooding back. Her laugh, her touch, her whispered prayers when she thought he wasn't listening. The last night she had been with them, she had prayed over the twins, her voice trembling with something he couldn't understand. And then she was gone. The police found nothing. The case went cold. His heart hardened. He vowed never to let Faith make a fool of him again. But now this maid, this girl barely older than 25, had dared to open that locked door. And the worst part? His children wanted it. Days passed. The twins' sadness deepened. Their teachers called, concerned. They seem withdrawn, one reported. Quieter than usual. He tried to fix it the only way he knew, gifts. New toys. Gadgets. Trips to expensive restaurants. But the sparkle in their eyes never returned. The joy felt forced. One night, his eldest twin looked up at him and asked a question that shattered him. "Daddy, why did you make her leave? Did we do something bad?" The billionaire froze. For the first time in years, he had no answer. The boy's lip trembled. "She made us feel safe." The younger twin chimed in, his voice breaking, "I miss her hugs." He excused himself abruptly, locking himself in his study. His chest heaved as he sank into the leather chair, his head in his hands. His empire was worth billions. He had everything: power, status, control. And yet, his children were broken. And for the first time, he realized, maybe he was too. He poured himself a drink, but it burned going down, leaving no comfort. He stared out the window into the darkness. Her face wouldn't leave his mind, the maid's quiet strength, her courage to stand up to him, her refusal to cower even when he thundered like a storm. Most people feared him. She hadn't. And though he had thrown her out with nothing, she had left behind something he couldn't erase. The seed of faith. The twins clung to it. And maybe deep down he did too. For the first time in years, he whispered into the silence. Not a prayer. Just words. "God, if you're there, help me fix this." The words hung in the air, trembling, fragile. He wasn't sure anyone was listening. But the moment he said them, something shifted inside him. The billionaire leaned back, staring at the ceiling, the weight of his choices pressing down. He had driven away the one person who had truly cared for his children. Not for his wealth, not for his name, but for them. He realized then, he had been wrong. Dead wrong. And unless he acted fast, it would cost him not only his children's happiness, but his own chance at redemption. The city skyline glittered against the night, but for the billionaire, it had lost its shine. Every penthouse meeting, every business deal, every new acquisition, it all felt like empty noise. Because at home, his empire was crumbling. The twins barely spoke anymore. Their laughter, once so bright, had dissolved into silence. Even their teachers warned him, they need stability. They need warmth. Something is missing. Something. No, someone. The billionaire sat alone in his vast study, staring at a framed photograph of his wife, the last family picture they had taken before she disappeared. Her smile was gentle, full of light. The twins were only toddlers then, resting against her shoulders. And he had looked whole. Now, everything felt fractured. The memory of that night replayed like a cruel film, the maid kneeling with the twins, their small voices lifted in prayer. His rage, her defiance. His words, cold and final, "You're finished here. Pack your things." And her whisper as she left, "Even broken hearts need light." Those words gnawed at him. One evening, while leaving a late meeting, he slid into the back of his sleek black car. The driver asked, "Home, sir?" But the billionaire didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stared out the tinted window at the blur of city lights. His chest was heavy, his thoughts clouded. Finally, he said quietly, "No, not yet." The car moved, but his mind stayed still, stuck in the ache of loss. When he returned to the mansion, it was close to midnight. He checked on the twins. They were fast asleep, but their small hands were clasped together as if in silent prayer. His breath caught. They hadn't forgotten. They hadn't let go. For the first time in years, The billionaire wept. Silent, hidden tears. He covered his mouth to stifle the sobs, afraid to wake them. His chest shook with a pain he thought he had buried long ago. This was his breaking point. He realized he could no longer pretend. His wealth couldn't heal the wound. His power couldn't bring peace to his children. His pride had cost them too much already. That night, he sat at his desk until dawn, his head heavy in his hands. He tried to bury himself in work, but the numbers blurred. All he could think about was her, where she had gone, how she was surviving, whether she was safe. She had no family in the city, no wealth, no support, and he had sent her away with nothing. The guilt consumed him. For the first time in his life, the billionaire didn't feel powerful. He felt helpless. And in that helplessness, something inside him broke, not in despair, but in surrender. He whispered into the empty room, almost afraid of his own voice. I was wrong. I need to make it right. The next morning, his decision was clear. He summoned his driver. We're going out of the city today, he said. Where to, sir? The billionaire hesitated. He didn't have an exact address, only fragments of what the maid had once mentioned about her home. A small village, dirt roads, a place most people had never heard of. Somewhere far, he finally said. Find her. Whatever it takes. The journey was long. Hours passed as the car left behind the smooth highways and glass towers of the city, trading them for winding rural roads and fields of green. The farther they drove, the deeper the ache in his chest grew. At last, they entered a remote settlement. Small houses built of wood and clay, children running barefoot, women carrying baskets of water. It was a world so far removed from his opulence that he felt almost alien. And then he saw her, carrying a bucket of water, her dress worn but clean, her hair tied back, her eyes still holding that quiet strength. She froze when she saw the black car pull up, her grip tightening on the bucket. The billionaire stepped out, his heart pounding. The villagers turned to watch. It was as if two worlds had collided, the man of wealth, power, and pride, and the young woman of faith, dignity, and survival. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence was thick, fragile. Finally, his voice broke through, low, rough, almost pleading. I was wrong. Her eyes widened slightly, but she said nothing. He took a step closer, his voice trembling. I threw you out. I stripped you of everything. And yet, my children, his throat caught, they've never stopped missing you. And neither have I. Still, she remained quiet, her expression unreadable. The billionaire's voice cracked as he continued. I thought I was protecting them from disappointment, from faith, from everything I've lost. But I only broke them. I broke myself. A long silence followed. The villagers whispered among themselves, watching the scene unfold. Finally, the maid set down the bucket. Her voice was calm, steady. Why are you here, sir? The billionaire's eyes glistened. Because I need you to come back. Not as a maid. Not as an employee. But as someone who belongs with us. With me. With them. The air was heavy, the moment suspended between rejection and redemption. He waited, his heart in his throat. And in her silence, he realized something profound. Forgiveness was not something he could buy. It was something he had to earn. The air between them was thick, heavy with memories, anger, and unspoken pain. The billionaire stood before her, stripped of the armor of wealth and pride. For once, his expensive suit, polished shoes, and black luxury car meant nothing. Here, in her world, those things carried no weight. What mattered was truth. The maid's gaze held him steady. She wasn't intimidated. Not anymore. She had seen his fury, survived his cruelty, and yet, somehow, still carried herself with dignity. Her voice, when it finally came, was quiet, but it cut through him like a blade. You sent me away with nothing. Do you know what that meant for me? For my family? The billionaire's jaw tightened. His shame deepened. I know, and I cannot undo that. Her eyes glistened, though she refused to let the tears fall. You thought prayers were poison, but your children, they clung to them. They needed them, and you punished me for giving them what they asked for. The words stung, but he didn't flinch away. For once, he allowed himself to stand in the fire. I was blind, he admitted. Blind to what they needed. Blind to what I needed. I thought faith made me weak after losing my wife. A flicker of softness crossed her face. She had heard whispers of his tragedy, but never from his own lips. I thought if I shut the door on hope, he continued, his voice cracking, then I would never feel the pain of losing it again. But all I did was shut out love. Shut out you. The maid's breath caught. A silence lingered, broken only by the distant laughter of children in the village. You can't just come here and expect forgiveness, she said finally, her tone firm. You can't expect me to forget the humiliation, the fear of being cast out with nowhere to go. He nodded slowly, his eyes locked on hers. I don't expect forgiveness. I only ask for a chance to earn it. For the first time, his voice held no command, no authority. Only humility. The villagers watched from a distance, whispering to each other. A billionaire kneeling in spirit before a maid. It was a story too strange to believe, and yet, it was real. The maid looked away, her heart torn. She remembered the boys, how they clung to her, how they whispered their little prayers at night. She remembered their warmth, their innocent laughter. And she remembered the storm in his eyes when he cast her out. Could she trust him again? The billionaire's voice broke into her thoughts, soft but desperate. They need you, not just as someone to care for them, but as someone to love them. I can give them everything money can buy, but you, he swallowed hard, you gave them what I couldn't. Her lips trembled, her heart battling between pride and compassion. Then he whispered the words she never expected to hear. I need you too. The weight of the moment pressed down on her chest. She turned away briefly, steadying her breath. When she faced him again, her eyes shone not with anger, but with fire. You hurt me deeply, she said, but I stayed true to what I believed. I didn't teach your boys' prayers to defy you. I did it because they were searching for light. His throat tightened. And I see now. I was the one lost in the dark. The maid studied him, searching his eyes for any trace of pride or deceit. But what she saw instead was brokenness, raw, unpolished, real. For the first time, she felt the walls around her own heart tremble. Slowly, she whispered, if I return, it won't be as a servant. It won't be as someone you command. It will be as someone who stands beside you. The billionaire's breath caught. His eyes widened slightly, then softened with relief. I wouldn't want it any other way. Her heart pounded as she spoke the words that would change everything. Then I will come back. For the twins. For what they mean to me. But also, to see if you truly mean this. The billionaire's chest swelled with gratitude. He bowed his head, his voice trembling. Thank you. The villagers murmured among themselves, their whispers rising like a tide. The scene felt surreal, two worlds colliding, yet somehow finding common ground. And for the first time in years, the billionaire felt something he thought he had buried forever, hope. As they stood there, facing one another, a quiet breeze rustled through the village. It carried with it the scent of earth, the sound of life, and the faint promise of a new beginning. But deep inside, both of them knew this was not the end. It was only the turning flame, the fragile spark of something greater. Something that could either burn bright enough to heal them both, or flicker out under the weight of their past. Only time would tell. The return to the mansion was quiet, almost sacred. The twins' eyes lit up the moment they saw her. They ran into her arms, clinging tightly, their little voices breaking with joy. You came back. You really came back. For the first time in weeks, their laughter echoed through the marble halls again. The billionaire watched from a distance, his heart swelling, though a shadow of guilt lingered in his chest. He had caused their suffering, and she had healed it in an instant. The days that followed felt different. Meals were lighter, conversations warmer. For the first time in years, the mansion felt like a home. But peace has a way of drawing out hidden truths. One evening, as the billionaire reviewed old files in his study, he stumbled upon a sealed envelope, something the police had returned to him years ago after his wife's disappearance. He had never opened it, too afraid of the pain it might hold. Now, his fingers trembled as he tore it open. Inside was a letter written by his wife, dated just days before she vanished. Her words spilled across the page. "If anything happens to me, please remember this. I prayed for you every night. I prayed that one day you would let go of your anger and find peace again. If I am gone, it is not God who abandoned you. It is the darkness of this world. Do not let it steal your light. And please, raise our sons to know hope, to know prayer, to know love." The billionaire's chest tightened, his breath shallow. He sank into the chair, the letter trembling in his hands. It wasn't the maid who had betrayed him. It was he who had betrayed his wife's last wish. The revelation cut deep. And yet, in the quiet of that moment, another shadow stirred, the bitter whisper of pride, anger, fear. Could he truly trust faith again? Could he allow someone else, this maid, to step into the role his wife had once filled? The thought unsettled him. That night, the mansion was restless. He tossed in his bed, haunted by dreams of his wife calling out to him, her voice fading into silence. At dawn, he wandered into the kitchen. He heard voices. Not the twins, but the maid, soft, steady, speaking on the phone. He paused, unseen, listening. Her words chilled him. "I don't know if I can stay. He says he's changed, but how do I know it's real? What if he only wants me here for the children? What if I'm just a replacement?" The billionaire's heart sank. His fists clenched. A storm of emotions surged inside him. Hurt, fear, betrayal. She doubted him. She questioned him behind his back. For a man who had built his empire on trust and control, the thought was unbearable. When she ended the call and turned, she froze. He was standing there, his face shadowed with pain. "You think I'm lying to you?" His voice was low, almost dangerous. Her eyes widened. You think this is some game? That I brought you back just to use you?" His voice cracked, anger laced with desperation. She stepped closer, her own voice trembling but strong. "I don't doubt your children's love. But you've lived behind walls of pride and power for so long. Forgive me for wondering if this sudden humility is real or just another mask." Her honesty struck him harder than any insult. For a moment, the silence was unbearable. The twins, woken by raised voices, peered around the corner, their faces pale with fear. The billionaire saw them. He saw their trembling lips, their worried eyes. And in that instant, his rage collapsed into shame. He had sworn to change, but here he was again, raising his voice, crushing the fragile trust they had begun to build. The maid knelt, wrapping the twins in her arms. "It's okay," she whispered to them, though her own voice shook. The billionaire turned away, gripping the edge of the counter until his knuckles turned white. His chest heaved with regret. He wanted to scream, to run, to undo the moment. Instead, his wife's letter echoed in his mind, "Do not let the darkness steal your light." Tears burned his eyes. He faced them again, his voice breaking. "I am sorry. I don't deserve any of you. Not their love, not your trust. But I swear," his voice faltered, "I swear I will fight every day to prove I am not that man anymore." The maid looked up at him, her arms still around the twins. Her eyes softened, not in blind forgiveness, but in recognition of his struggle. For the first time, she saw not just a billionaire, not just a broken man, but a father desperate to make things right. And in that fragile, painful moment, a deeper bond began to form, not built on wealth or power or fear, but on truth. Revelation had cut them open. Betrayal had tested them. But sometimes, The fire that nearly destroys you is the same fire that purifies you. The night air was heavy, as though the heavens themselves were holding their breath. Alexander stood by the balcony of his sprawling mansion, the glittering city below nothing more than a blur of lights. His heart was a battlefield, between guilt, anger, and something far deeper than he had allowed himself to feel in years. Inside, the twins slept soundly, their innocence protected from the storm raging in their father's chest. But in the quiet corner of the house, he could almost hear Amira's voice, the soft prayers she used to whisper with the boys, the lullabies, the hope she carried despite her poverty. That night, Alexander made a decision that would alter the course of his life. He could not let her go, not like this. He couldn't let his pride rob his sons of the only figure of love they had left. This was a man broken enough to finally be real. "Do you even hear yourself?" she whispered. "Marriage? After everything?" "Yes." His voice was steady now, unwavering. "Because in losing you, I realized what I truly lost the day my wife disappeared. Faith, hope, love. You gave those to my boys when I couldn't. You taught them to smile again. Amira, you taught me to live again." The villagers gathered at a distance, whispering, stunned to see a wealthy man on his knees before a maid. But in that moment, none of it mattered. Amira's chest rose and fell, her heart torn between fear of another heartbreak and the undeniable truth that she had already given a piece of herself to this family. Slowly, hesitantly, she knelt beside him, placing her trembling hand over his. "I will come back," she whispered, "but not for wealth, not for luxury. I will come back because those boys deserve love. And maybe you do too." Alexander's eyes glistened, and for the first time in years, he prayed silently, not with words, but with gratitude. That night, as they drove back to the mansion, the twins ran out of the house when they saw her step out of the car. Their little feet flew across the driveway, and they wrapped themselves around Amira, their joyous cries echoing through the estate. "Amira, you came back!" She hugged them tightly, her tears soaking into their small shoulders. Over their heads, she met Alexander's gaze. He nodded, silently promising never to let pride destroy what had been rebuilt. Dear viewer, sometimes life brings us to our knees before it raises us higher than we've ever been. Alexander's story is a reminder that forgiveness is not weakness, it is strength. And love, true love, often comes from the places we least expect. But before we continue to the final chapter of this story, take a moment. Drop your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done if you were Amira? Walked away forever, or taken the chance to build something new? And if this story has touched your heart even a little, hit that subscribe button. Because these aren't just stories, they're journeys we walk together. And the next one may just be yours. The camera fades on the reunited family, framed by the warm glow of the mansion's lights. But the story is far from over. For every climax carries a ripple of consequences, and for Alexander and Amira, those ripples are just beginning. The years that followed became the sweetest chapters of Alexander's life, chapters he once believed he would never get to write. The mansion, once a cold shell of marble and silence, now echoed with laughter. The twins, no longer fragile and withdrawn, grew into spirited young boys full of questions, dreams, and endless energy. Their favorite place was no longer their game room filled with expensive toys, but the prayer corner Amira helped them set up in the living room, a small wooden table with 2 tiny stools where they whispered gratitude every night. And Alexander? He found himself kneeling with them, awkward at first, resistant even, but slowly discovering that prayer was not weakness, nor superstition. It was surrender. It was healing. There were mornings when he would stand by the garden, coffee in hand, watching Amira chase the boys across the lawn, their giggles floating into the air like music. In those moments, he realized the mansion wasn't alive because of wealth, but because of love. For so long, Alexander had carried grief like a badge of honor, a scar that defined him. He had buried his heart beneath layers of business, arrogance, and disbelief. But Amira, with nothing but kindness and faith, had reached into the rubble and pulled out the man he had forgotten he could be. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the skies orange, Alexander took Amira's hand in his and whispered words he had not spoken to anyone since the disappearance of his wife. "Thank you for giving me back my life." She smiled, her eyes glistening, and answered softly, "No, Alexander. You found your own light. I only held the lantern." The villagers who once whispered about the maid and the billionaire soon told their children the story with awe. Not because of wealth, but because it became proof that love could cross any line: race, class, pain, or loss. And for the twins, their stepmother was not a replacement, but a blessing. They grew to love her with the same fervor with which she had once prayed for them in secret. Dear friend watching this, sometimes life doesn't give us what we expect. Sometimes it strips us of everything until we are forced to face the raw truth of who we are. But in that darkness, if we are willing to open our eyes, we may just see a flicker of light. A person, a moment, a whisper of hope that changes everything. For Alexander, that flicker came in the form of a young maid who believed in prayer. For Amira, it came in the form of two little boys who gave her reason to keep loving even when she had nothing. And for you, maybe that flicker has already come. Or maybe it is on the way. So as you leave this video, I want you to reflect. Who has been the Amira in your life? Who carried light into your darkness? Leave your thoughts and your city or country in the comments. Because your story, too, might just inspire someone else watching. And if this story touched your heart, don't just watch and leave. Subscribe, not because it helps us, but because it means you've chosen to keep walking these emotional journeys with us. Stories that remind us all that love, forgiveness, and faith are never out of reach.